From the Oklahoma newsroom, it's time for Thunder Thursday, our extended look at Thunder basketball. I'm Jenni Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Tramel and Thunder beat writer Erik Horne. Guys, it's been an interesting couple games for the Thunder, and maybe most of all, Erik, interesting couple of games for Russell Westbrook. We saw struggle city against Denver over the weekend, and then a really great game against Cleveland on Wednesday night. What changed? What do you feel like was at the heart of why he was so much better against Cleveland?
Well, maybe it's taking 5 3-pointers instead of 12. I mean, that's a start. But overall, playing against Cleveland and Denver are two completely different animals. Denver had a guy named Torrey Craig. You guys might not know about him, but he's a pretty solid defender and a big guard. The teams like to throw those big guards at Russell Westbrook. He frustrated Westbrook. Denver's got a pretty good defense, one of the top 10 in the league. Cleveland has none of those things. They don't have a defender that can stay with Westbrook in any stretch. Their defense is the worst in the league statistically, and Westbrook took full advantage of that last night. He had an excellent floor game against little resistance. And even the mid-range shots he did take looked a lot better against a bad Cleveland defense than they did against Denver's pretty good defense.
Obviously, Barry, Russell's coming back after that ankle sprain, pretty severe, after only playing a few games, coming back from his off-season procedure. So where his legs are, where his conditioning is, I think is still a little bit up in the air. Does any of that, in your mind, explain those games where he has a lot of threes? I mean, I don't know. Does he feel like he can finish at the rim well enough to get there, to really depend on that like we've seen him do a lot?
I think that's the crux of the matter in that Denver game I was watching. I don't think he's got full confidence in finishing at the rim. Now, he looked better Wednesday night. Maybe he's feeling better. But I thought Saturday night against Denver, he was struggling to finish at the rim. He got to where he didn't want to go in there. He's fantastic there. Obviously the physical things have piled up, and he's got to be wondering if he's healthy. But I think when you launch that many threes, not just him but the whole team, it's a way of settling. It's a way to fight fatigue. I think that's what's going on, and I think they just said, you know what, let's just not get into it tonight. And I think when Russell gets his confidence back, provided he does, I think he will. But when he gets his confidence back with the attack mode and finishing at the rim, you're going to see fewer and fewer of those nonsensical shots.
Was part of the equation, Erik, as well, the fact that this was the second night, that Denver game, second night of a back-to-back, third game in 4 nights? I mean, that's a pretty tight window for games. And if you're Russell Westbrook, conditioning still coming along, does that factor in your mind, or was that just a game where he lost his head a little bit?
I think it's a combination. That was, I think, their 4th game in 6 nights. It's been a long week for the Thunder. They come off the road, played well in Golden State, played okay against Charlotte, and then had a great comeback against Denver. It expends a lot of energy coming back from 25 points. And, Westbrook comes back in that Denver game in a 2-point possession and starts jacking a bunch of threes. So I think it's a combination of things. We saw earlier in the season when Russell Westbrook, even when he came back from the long layoff, missing preseason, missing some games at the beginning of the season, he was still getting to the rim and finishing at a high rate. I thought his shot selection was really good in those first-string games before he suffered the ankle injury against the Pelicans. So I think that it's a matter of Russell Westbrook getting recalibrated once again. I think that the long week probably did have something to do with that, but he's just got to be smarter. 11 years in the league, he's got to pick his spots. He's got guys around him who are capable of making plays too. We saw that last night. You give up the ball early in possessions, get off ball. Paul George can facilitate, kick out to Russell. He can hit those catch-and-shoot three-pointers that the Thunder wants him taking more of instead of those off-the-dribble ones. So I think it's more about Russell Westbrook thinking about the time and situation, which has been a struggle for him his entire career, but he's plenty capable of doing, as we saw last night against Cleveland when he wants to.
All right. Russell Westbrook, favorite subject of Thunder fans everywhere. Potentially a favorite subject of Barry Tramel that rises to the top, Deonte Burton. Barry,
The guy's growing on me. He couldn't play a lick of defense, but he's showing some signs, and he clearly can score, and it's a great story. I think Billy needs to play him more.
Wow.
Because this team is not
Have you?
No, listen.
He's come full circle. He's come full circle on Deonte Burton.
He's showing signs. I want to find out if he really can play NBA defense. And if he can, let's find out. And if he can, he's going to help you. Because a lot of this offensive stagnation goes away with Deonte Burton because he does the two things everybody in the league wants. He shoots threes and he drives to the basket.
Yeah. The big thing with Burton to me is, and you could see it on the floor, is for long stretches he gets fatigued. He's got that big body. He's having to chase guys around the perimeter. Billy really considers him like a small ball four, even though he's more the size of a shooting guard in terms of his height. So when Deonte Burton, when Billy can manage his minutes to where Deonte Burton's not playing these long stretches and getting winded, and he can't play the defense or he can't finish at the rim, as he does with the energy that he initially has when he comes on the floor, he's an effective player. And credit Billy Donovan last night. Alex Abrinas was getting run ragged off of screens. Cleveland was attacking him on defense. He wasn't making his shots. Billy goes with Deonte Burton the last 6 minutes of the second quarter, and he's an effective player. The Thunder needed a boost last night, and that's what Deonte Burton is. He's dynamite when he gets in the floor. He's just a guy who's 6'4", 250, who is just going to be explosive around the rim. And, he even showed a couple of plays on defense last night, staying with guys, getting a block. Just about managing his minutes to get the most out of him in those short bursts.
Hearing you talk about being a bigger body and the things he can do, Barry, I've got a name for you. You're going to love it. PJ Tucker. Is there any chance Deonte Burton could eventually drive down one of your favorite player boulevard, PJ Tucker?
I actually thought of that comparison the other day, Saturday, when I was watching him. I thought, he's built like PJ Tucker. He does some of the same things. The difference is PJ Tucker has and always has played big-time defense. So I don't know. I don't think Deonte Burton can get there. If he gets there, it's a runaway success. But if he could just get passable on defense, maybe you play him like a hockey line, where Erik the Red talking about
short bursts,
3 minutes at a time. You don't have to go 5-6 minutes. Play him for 2 or 3 minutes and then get him out. Yeah. But he helps his team when it stagnates offensively. There's no doubt about it.
And look, with the Thunder scheduled the way it is now, this is the time for Billy Donovan to be throwing out these strange lineups like he's doing, playing Deonte Burton, getting Abdul Nader in there early in the fourth quarter. See what these guys have. They're not playing world beaters right now. Now, when the schedule turns at the turn of the year, you're going to have to tighten up your rotations a little bit once you get guys healthy. But right now, it doesn't hurt you to give Deonte Burton some run and see what he can do.
All right, we'll talk a little bit more about that schedule here in just a minute, but let's talk big picture here for a second. I'm just going to throw you guys an open-ended question. We'll start with you, Erik. What is the Thunder doing well right now? What are they doing maybe even better than you thought they might be doing at this point?
They're not turning the ball over very much. And that is just that, from what we've seen from the Thunder in past years, that is just an incredible thing. Paul George has been a guy who's been sloppy with the ball. He's kind of got that Kevin Durant trait of like dribbling into tight spaces with those long arms and limbs. Russell Westbrook's been a turnover machine, which you kind of understand because he's such a high usage rate player. Mm-hmm. But, getting a guy like Dennis Schroeder doesn't turn the ball over very much. Raymond Felton's a guy who had a really low turnover ratio. Jeremy Grant's a guy who moves the ball relatively quickly when he gets it. Steven Adams is a low turnover player. I think the Thunder's in the top 10 in the league in terms of turnover rate, and when they're turning over people at the frequency that they do, they're always going to cause a ton of turnovers because of their length and athleticism. That's a recipe for success in itself. It sounds cliche, but that's what coaches love. You don't turn the ball over, and you turn the other team over. And for a team that doesn't shoot it very well, that's a big-time recipe for success. The Thunder gets itself in trouble when it has those turnover clusters because they're not a great shooting team, and that just removes possessions that they could be getting layups or free throws.
Yeah, you can't, if you're not shooting the three well, you can't give possessions away with turnovers. Barry, what in your estimation is Thunder doing well right now?
I love their defense. They're playing without Andre Robertson, and they're still the top-rated defense in the NBA. And so this commitment to defense, as long as they do that, all this other stuff, Russell's shot selection, the three-point percentage, all that stuff is details to me. If they commit to defense, they're going to be in a good shape come spring.
As you guys have talked about those two things, I wonder if it is maybe even magnified, or you can boil it down to the fact that they're doing those things well, and we see it reflected in better third quarters, Erik. Third quarters was where the Thunder would completely fall apart a year ago. You could just guarantee it. It was going to go from either a small deficit to a big deficit, or a lead to not a lead. I mean, completely different. Maybe those two areas of improvement are where you can encapsulate it right there in the third quarter.
It's remarkable. They got the best third quarter point differential in the league. I think they're outscoring opponents by 84 points in the third quarter this year. That is such a big difference from last year, where these guys came out so lackadaisical out of halftime. And you don't want to throw everything at Carmelo Anthony, but you just kind of see some things that kind of parallel.
Throw it.
Okay, it's a combination of things. One, you've got a better player in Dennis Schroeder who's coming in, and he's able to give you better minutes off the bench with that second unit, and he just stabilizes things, and he's such a more efficient player than Carmelo Anthony is. But on the other hand, Carmelo Anthony, I think, he sort of, in the way that he was good for the Thunder locker room, he was also kind of a bad for the Thunder locker room. He kind of put them at a sense of comfort and ease, and I think that was good for Russell Westbrook because of the tension that Russell Westbrook was coming off of with the triple-double season. I think Russell Westbrook was a more relaxed guy last year, but at the same time, I think the sense of urgency in the Thunder locker room as a whole was down completely last year. You saw it in the first 20 games. They did not take teams very seriously last year. This year, they're taking bad teams, and they're laying it on them in the third quarter. This is 2 games in a row where they've held teams under 20 points in the third quarter. The Thunder's down 25 points to Denver in the third. They hold them to 16 points. They're struggling against Cleveland in the first half. Cleveland's the worst team in the league. They hold Cleveland to 15 points in the third quarter. A lot of that's improving your talent. A lot of that's bringing Jeremy Grant into the starting lineup instead of a Carmelo Anthony, which makes your defense just exponentially better. But a lot of it's just better focus.
Yeah. We're talking about third quarter. I want to talk about 3 guys that are interlinked right now, and that being Steven Adams, now playing alongside Jeremy Grant in that starting lineup, Erik, as you just mentioned. But Patrick Patterson moving to that second unit. That it's been a total boom for Adams and Grant, Barry, but Patterson struggling right now. I mean, it's really interesting to see how these 3, how it's working and then how it's not working.
Patterson's in an awful slump, missed a layup last night. Not shooting well. Is it 4 or 5 games straight? He's gone scoreless. He had the hot hand there for a while early in the season, was knocking down a bunch of threes. Yeah. He's got to get back to that, or frankly, his playing time will go down. I mean, he's not a good enough defender to keep Deonte Burton on the bench if Patterson's not making shots. Billy's got options with this roster. So Patrick Patterson's going to have to start producing, or he's going to find himself, sliding down the hierarchy.
Erik, we saw how well initially that move, putting Grant in the starting lineup, worked. I don't know if I thought it would work long term as well as it has. I mean, it seemed to jumpstart Jeremy Grant in the moment, but that's the ticket right there. I mean, I don't see any reason why Billy Donovan's coming off that starting in the paint duo anytime soon.
No, he's the guy. And if anybody would have said that Jeremy Grant was going to be able to get back up to 36% from 3 and play the kind of game he's played on both ends, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. He was excellent last night. I think he had 21 points. He played that role that Andre Robertson does of kind of lurking that baseline and running and making those cuts along the baseline and up the lane, that Russell Westbrook can find those guys off of that for lobs and some easy looks around the rim. Jeremy Grant's playing some great basketball right now. He's not taking a ton of threes like he was 2 seasons ago when the Thunder needed that spacing. He's able to kind of mix his game and have a little bit on the inside, a little bit from the corner from 3-point range, and it's working magnificently for them right now. And we all know that his defense is what he's going to lean on with that length and athleticism coming from the weak side and getting some blocks. He and Adams have really been 2 of the best front court combinations in the league so far.
It strikes me that Steven Adams can play with almost anybody. I mean, like, the guy just goes out and he plays.
Fantastic.
It doesn't really matter. But Barry, what Erik just said, it strikes me that Steven Adams, any help you can give him defensively. I mean, I think that it's just sort of an added bonus for him to not have to do everything by himself. I'm not saying Patrick Patterson wasn't doing a decent job as a starter with defense, but to have another athletic big like Jeremy Grant alongside him, I have to think for Steven Adams, that just maximizes what he does on the court.
Dare I say it? Last night, watching Jeremy Grant defend the rim, I thought of Serge Ibaka in his prime.
Oh, wow.
Now, Serge is an all-time shot blocker, one of the best the league's had in years and years. Jeremy's not that, but the way he protected the rim last night made you think, hey, that's an element the Thunder's been missing since the Victor Oladipo trade. And when you put him out there with Adams, all of a sudden you got a premier defensive center who defends the pick and roll, defends the low post, and tosses infidels into the 6th row. Then you got next to him a rim protector. So, man, it's a great combination. I thought Patrick Patterson would be a better fit as a starter because of the outside shooting. Clearly, that's not the case, even if Patrick's making his shots. Now that he's not, it's a no-brainer. Jeremy Grant's a fabulous, fabulous psychic to Adams.
Barry's bringing in other videos. I called a sidekick a psychic earlier today. So he's
I thought I heard something there. I was like, what is going on here?
We're mixing our metaphors.
That works.
By the way, to hear you talk about infidels being thrown into the 6th row made me think of the Anthony Davis fun of a few weeks ago. Sign me up for that about every 2 weeks. I would watch that every single time you want with Steven Adams and Anthony Davis. All right, guys. Erik, you mentioned earlier a chance for the Thunder to continue to win at a pretty high rate. And if you look at the schedule coming up, lot of East teams. Friday against Atlanta, Monday against Detroit, Wednesday against the Nets. Obviously some road games in there. Also Friday at Chicago. But Erik, when you look at the East, that's where the West feasts. They go to the East to feast.
They go to the East to feast. We have the meats in the East. Oh man, I tell bad jokes. Okay, but yeah, look, this is setting up for the Thunder to be, potentially approaching 20 wins by the end of next week. You get Atlanta on Friday at home. Then you've got the 3-game road set: Brooklyn. Detroit, Brooklyn, Chicago. It's a wonky back and forth, but those are 3 very winnable games. Detroit's playing well right now, but still, that's a game that the Thunder should be able to go in and win on the road against Blake Griffin and company. And then Brooklyn plays that wonky pace that kind of gets the Thunder out of their game sometimes, similar to Sacramento, but that's a team that the Thunder should be able to handle as well. And then you got Chicago, it's just not very good. The Thunder's pounded them at the United Center in the past couple of years. That's a slate of winnable games every other day next week that the Thunder should be able to take advantage of before the schedule tightens up a little bit in the weeks to come. They're going to be facing Utah for the first time in mid-December.
Yeah, and that brings up a very West week, Barry, that following week, starting on December 10th. You've got Utah, which, they've had their struggles, but then New Orleans, Anthony Davis, get that matchup again. Denver, and both of those are away games, New Orleans and Denver. Then the Clippers come in here. It's the second night of a back-to-back. The Bulls get thrown in there, but then Sacramento, the Jazz again. So some West Coast, the Western Conference teams, Barry, and we know it's going to be tight. The Thunder, if they're playing well, they got to win some of those games. So down later in the year, you're not looking back and saying, man, if they'd have just won that game or that game. We haven't sort of had as much of that this year as we had last year.
It's been a cushy November. That's just the truth. It's a fairly gentle opening to the season. Actually, October was pretty rough, but then November's just been a cushy schedule, and it toughens up when you have a long run of Cleveland and Brooklyn and Detroit and whoever from the East, Charlotte. Mm-hmm. There's like 14 good teams in the West. Eventually, they're going to show up on the schedule because you play 52 games against the West. They got to come sometime. So yeah, you're right. That mid-December stretch is going to be very interesting because those guys, one after another, you're playing good teams. And the West is better than we thought. Teams like Dallas and the Clippers are better. They're actually playoff contenders that we may not have thought that in the offseason. So really 14 good teams in the West is what it comes down to.
Good news. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say one bad team's Phoenix. Everybody else is a quality team.
Got 3 wins against Phoenix, too. Good news for the Thunder is, as that schedule starts to get more difficult, they're going to start getting guys back from injury. Terrence Ferguson and Hamidou Diallo, you can expect them probably in the next week or so to start getting back into practice. And then we're going to start getting on Andre Robertson watch pretty soon. I mean, this is a guy who is going to be reevaluated in the next couple of weeks. I wouldn't expect him to be on the court immediately. He's still not going through contact practices. But around the turn of the year, that's a guy who you're going to start hear some more things about. And this Thunder team's already got an elite defense. It can take it up to possibly one of the best defenses we've seen in quite some time if Robertson gets on the floor and he looks anything like he used to.
Are they going to start wrapping ankles in bubble wrap just to make sure nobody?
Bodies, not just ankles, bodies.
Wow.
Hamidou Diallo / Gumby, that wasn't an ankle. That was a full leg kind of yoga pose that he did there in Golden State, and somehow he's dunking off of his. He's dunking now, and he's running the floor. So those young, resilient bodies, Jenny. It's a great thing to have. I'm far removed from it. But,
I was going to say I don't know anything about that anymore.
Must
but,
be nice.
Oh well. All right, Thunder back at it on Friday night. Atlanta is here. You might know Oklahoman Trae Young on that roster, so it'll be a bit of a homecoming for him to come back here. And then Thunder headed to Detroit, where another Oklahoman, Blake Griffin, stars for the Pistons. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.